Welcome to the Love is the Cure Foundation podcast. I'm Alfonso Vega.
And I'm Lyndell Vega.
Our goal at the Love is the Cure Foundation podcast is to have conversations that are valuable to families as they go through their own pediatric cancer journey. Our aim is to offer families an understanding of what their journey may entail when their child is diagnosed with cancer. On today's episode, we have the privilege of speaking with Victoria Ruvolo, Inigo's physical therapist from Spaulding Rehabilitation in Charlestown, Massachusetts. When we first arrived at Spaulding, Inigo had just completed his initial rounds of radiation therapy following brain tumor surgery. As some of you may know, during those first few months, Inigo couldn't walk, talk, or move his hands, making communication incredibly difficult. This was the state in which we met Victoria, who brought her calm and compassionate presence into every session. Inigo loved her. Spaulding is known for its expertise in helping children like Inigo, and Victoria embodied this perfectly. She would meet Inigo in his room, and together they would head off to physical therapy. It was truly remarkable to watch her work with him and see how he responded to her gentle guidance. Despite the challenges, Inigo approached each session with joy, and under Victoria's care, we witnessed incredible breakthroughs. Victoria patiently and skillfully helped Inigo as he regained his ability to walk. I still remember the moments when they would walk the hallways, tackle stairs, and even ride a recumbent bike, with Victoria running behind ensuring his safety. The sight of Inigo giggling as he pedaled around the 8th floor is something we'll never forget. Physical therapists like Victoria are true heroes, and we are immensely grateful to have had her expertise during such a critical time in Inigo's recovery. Victoria, thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome to the Love is the Cure Foundation podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, Victoria, welcome. We're just so pleased to have you on here and just so happy to see you again. So we just want to start off. Are you able to share a little bit about your background and experience at Spaulding Rehab with us?
Yeah, so I first started working at Spaulding when I was in PT school, actually. I was a rehab aide there for 6 months. Which is where I learned a lot about just what rehab even was. And I was on the pediatric floor, so I got to see, all the types of patients that they would see there, and just really fell in love with that setting. And then when I graduated PT school 2 years later in 2019, I was hired as a physical therapist on the pediatric floor. So I worked up there for 4 years, seeing all types of children from infants up to 18, sometimes older, with all sorts of diagnoses. But we did see a lot of different types of kids with different types of brain tumors, posterior fossa syndrome. So it was a pretty common diagnosis for us to see up there.
Yeah. And what motivated you in particular to pursue working with pediatrics, or was this something that, they just needed, or was it a special interest that you had?
It's definitely something that even growing up, I just always loved, working with kids, babysitting, teaching swimming lessons, anything like that. When I had the opportunity to try it out in PT school, I loved it. And I really got drawn to all of the variety I would see. I like that every kid I was seeing was for something different, a different age, a different diagnosis. And then there's this extra challenge of PT with children where I know what our goals are and what the exercises are I want them to do. But then it's also how do we make this fun so that they're actually going to want to do this and get all the same benefits out of it?
Yeah.
So much different than adults, I guess.
Yes.
Or is it?
Mm-hmm.
Is that? Because kids are always looking to have fun.
Exactly, which is just fun for everybody involved too, because you just have to be doing something fun. But definitely very different. Because you can't just give, a child the same exercise you would give an adult, like lifting a weight or something. Even if they can do it, they may not just be trying as hard or understand why it's helpful to them. So you really get a child is going to put in more effort into something that they enjoy, which in turn means that they're going to get more benefit out of it.
Yeah.
So we're actually going to see, better results
Yeah.
if we're making it fun for them and meaningful.
I guess integrating play for them means more fun for you too. I mean, I can see how that.
You're saying that children, because it's fun, they just work harder at their therapies. That's interesting because as an adult, I would think like if I had some major injury that needed rehab, I'd be pretty focused. But I guess when it comes to playing and fun,
Maybe you'd want it to be fun too, even as an adult.
yeah, because I am a big
Bring on the toys.
I'm a big child. Yes, yes, you're right.
Yeah, we should. We should make it more fun for everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And so, should we talk a little bit about Inigo's experience and journey? on his
Yeah,
way
let's
to
jump into
Victoria?
that. Quick question though. So you said that you had seen posterior fossa syndrome before. One of the things, and this is really jumping deep into the deep end here of the pool, but one of the things as a parent that frustrated me was the common phrase that we would hear where people would tell us, "Oh, he'll just snap out of it one day," and as exciting as that can be as a parent, now after going through the entire journey, I am frustrated that I heard so much of that. Why do you think? Because it was never from interesting enough, it was never from therapy teams. And why do you think the system does that to parents at times? And as a physical therapist that is specifically looking at a child or looking at many other children that you've dealt with posterior fossa syndrome, why does the system do that, and why can that be hurtful to the overall journey?
Yeah, it's a good question. I definitely don't know. I'm not sure. This is all like speculation, but I think especially when you're dealing with, a sick child and their parents, it's hard to give hard answers sometimes. When you know that, the parents are hoping for that easy answer of, yeah, this is all just going to get better. That is sometimes easier to just initially say, but yeah, like you're saying, we're not doing our jobs correctly, really, if you're giving an answer that you don't have evidence to back that up, or giving, a sort of false hope. Like definitely it's harder initially to give a more like realistic answer. But that's what's going to really better prepare our patients and their families for, what they have, the road coming up and what we have to prepare for. I think also just from our experience in the rehab side of it, we do see kids who are coming to Spaulding are those more complex situations or, the surgeries that don't always go as planned. So maybe there is another like set of children that do have a much shorter bout with their posterior fossa syndrome and do snap out of it in some way. And we just don't get to see those at Spaulding because they don't need us. So I think the therapy side of it is we're always seeing those really complex or more drawn out situations too. So that's going to be where we have more of that experience with children who have a more, just difficult or more complicated diagnosis journey.
I loved with you that it was always about what the next day's work was going to be and like what homework was going to be and what the process was going to be. But yeah, I guess just starting off with one of the most difficult things for me as a parent dealing with a child with posterior fossa syndrome was the idea that he would just snap out of it one day. And I think as people that we live very active lives, and Inigo was very active before his illness, it would have made a lot more sense for us to actively work through something than the idea of, oh, he's just going to snap out of it. Because that never felt like it was ever going to be true, even though that's what was told to us.
Yeah. I was always, I guess, apprehensive about how much functionality he'd lose if we didn't pursue something, Yeah.
Yeah, which is, you guys were always, great advocates for Inigo and so ready to, just pick up any sort of like homework, exercise, anything that you could do to help, which really benefited him the whole time.
And well, now that you said that, I'd like to jump into
Yeah.
what are your strategies in? I know we have a whole layout of questions, and I always do this to Lindy. I jump into other things, so we will get to those questions that we have laid out. But how do you encourage parents to do the hard work?
I think every family dynamic and every parent is different. Some definitely are more, afraid of doing something wrong or accidentally doing something that is painful to their child or anything like that. So it's somewhat about reading that situation. Do we need to just be giving you a little bit more confidence? Or some families, like you guys, were kind of just ready to jump right into it, and we're like, please give us anything we can do if it's going to help. But I think in the end, every parent is just trying to help their kid however they can. So in that way, it's, if I can correctly teach you how to help your child, no parent's going to say no to that. But it is about finding what not just every child, but also their parents really need to help you guys as a family be successful.
I remember having thoughts about how we should walk Inigo. And so I had watched things online with other kids that were going through rehabilitation to help them walk again. And so I had come up with my own, like, oh, hey, we should do this or we should do that. What do you think about this? And I remember you were so kind about, no, that's not how that's going to work. And so I think that's so, that's awesome. I love that. I love that you were so kind about it, about how, no, you're wrong. And, that's not actually going to help him. Like, this is how you should hold him, or this is how you should walk with him. Or I think it was in particular, I was thinking about like a belt or something like that where I could hold him or something. And you were explaining to me in the kindest of ways how to do it and the proper way to do it. And it just, man, in that moment, I was like, yeah, she's a professional at this for a reason, and I should probably listen, because I think as a parent, you're so anxious to help your child and you want to do everything you can for them. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you're right. You might come up with things that are wrong or may not be beneficial for them going forward. So,
I think that's you're always going to be everyone's Googling anything healthcare related, but then you did the completely right thing though. You Googled, had an idea, and then just asked about it. Be like, is, this thing we found on the internet, does that apply to us or whatever? So I think that's it's great. I mean, I love, having parents come to me with ideas. And you also just being so open to feedback or, how can we apply that idea or whatever.
So, if we can, I'd just like to paint a little picture, I guess, for our listeners on what Inigo's state was when he arrived at Spaulding. I think it's just important to kind of talk about how, the things you mentioned earlier, that, his hands had just started moving when we arrived at Spaulding. We were walking him at Boston Children's Hospital for about 3 months, but it was the both of us assisting him, or he'd be, in the walking contraption there with physical therapy in the hospital. So he arrived in a state where, he couldn't walk. He needed full assist. Even just sitting up in a chair, he needed a lot of help with his posture. We had to put pillows under his arms and behind his back and all kinds of things just to hold him straight. He just had a lot of weakness. You could tell like his muscles had started to atrophy quite a bit, because after 3 months of being hospitalized, those things just change for a kid, especially a kid like Inigo. I mean, he started out with so much muscle build. He was quite an athlete, and we watched that, kind of slip by and wonder, like, well, what can he do with all this muscle loss? So he is quite he was deconditioned a bit and, didn't have good balance anymore. But if you can recall, Victoria, can you describe your first interactions with Inigo or like the first assessments that you made?
Yeah, I definitely can. I remember how he used to walk, which I guess because I'm the PT, that's like my memory, is how he was walking when he first got there. In general, I guess our first, that initial evaluation on your first day when you're at rehab would involve me coming into the room, sometimes with an aide, just introducing myself to you guys and Inigo. And especially in your case, since Inigo wasn't talking then, just a lot of getting to know you, finding out about Inigo through both of you, his likes and dislikes and what he was like before all of this and all of that sort of stuff. I remember the way he was walking, he had a lot of weakness in his core, which was affecting his balance, which is completely typical with his diagnosis. So he mostly when he walked was just relying a lot on whoever was standing behind him, was kind of leaning back. But he had a lot of movement in his legs and he was quick. So he was taking like these really fast steps all on his own. But he just needed like full support to keep his balance and stand while he was walking.
Mm-hmm. So how do you set goals for these type of kids who come in with posterior fossa syndrome and these types of weakness? Like, what do you focus on first when you're thinking like, okay, this child is able to move feet, that's good, but how do you move, what do you do from there?
So we usually make kind of just as a part of the process with therapy, we have short and long-term goals. So a lot of the time for us in rehab, our overall goal of the whole team is to get you guys home safely and get Inigo to a place where he's strong enough to be able to get into the house and get back out of the house if you guys have appointments or things like that, and just make sure that he's able to do all of that as safely and as independently as possible, which for some families and some patients, depending on the situation, that means we're really going for that independence side of it. We really want them to be able to do things on their own, not need that hands-on assistance. For other families, more importantly, they just want to be back home in their home setting where they think that's going to be, more therapeutic to continue that rehab process there. So our goals might be a little bit more geared towards getting the child home, still needing assistance to walk around or get up the stairs, but just making sure that they can do that with one family member, and that both parents or whoever's going to be assisting the child at home are comfortable and doing that safely too. So it's kind of like thinking about that end discharge, even though it's just day one, and kind of working backwards from there. Then like, what are the little steps we need to take to get to that end goal?
Yeah.
So you have goal checklists. What if a child doesn't make it to those?
It's flexible. We're always able to adjust our goals depending on how things go. Medical complications, pop up all the time, or since we see so many kids with similar diagnoses, I think the team overall is pretty good at kind of estimating where we think we'll be in a certain number of weeks. But things change all the time in healthcare, rehab. So that's a part of the process. As long as we are able to get to that overall goal of like getting home safe, that's where like we can do that with different equipment. We can do that with different services. If we need home therapy, we're always kind of adjusting the plans. We send kids home with all different types of disabilities after different injuries.
Yeah.
Do you ever work with kids that, so all kids have different drives within them.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever work with patients that you see more potential in them than what actually comes out?
I guess it's more just maybe like the timelines not matching up. So I think that we can, expect or anticipate that they will reach, like that certain goal. And maybe they're on their way there, but it's just taking a little bit longer. They're making that progress, or they're making it a little bit slower than we were initially anticipating. So that is something that is always expected when we, discharge a patient from rehab. We are never saying that like this is the end of your therapy journey. We're sending every kid home with continued therapy, exercises to do at home, things like that, so that you can keep making that progress at home. So yeah, maybe sometimes that progress is a little bit slower, or maybe you have a little setback at some point, but we're always expecting that the progress is going to continue happening even after Spaulding.
I asked that because I wonder how you find the special tools to make sure that a child stays motivated. Because I could see a child going through a situation and feeling like they're not winning. And so feeling like they want to give up. And so even though there's a lot of potential in them to succeed, maybe they give up because either their overall prognosis from their illness, whatever their illness may be, or they have such high standards for themselves that they're not reaching those standards. How do you find the specific tool that may motivate one child from another, and what does that journey look like?
Yeah. I think that's the really cool part about working with the team that we have in rehab, is when we get to those kind of like little roadblocks or feeling like we're stuck with a kid or not making progress, is we have that whole team of support. So all the other therapists that are seeing that same child, we have Child Life, which is awesome for coming up with like creative solutions or different plans when we're stuck on our own from like the therapy side of it. So working with that smaller therapy team, and then the rest of the like hospital team, we have the adaptive sports that I know we're going to talk about at some point. So usually that's just getting more people involved to be like, what else can we come up with? Or is it, doing an outing, getting out of the hospital, to do something that would be maybe like, being stuck in this little unit, going back and forth from your room to the therapy room isn't super motivating, but if we can somehow make therapy involved in going outside or going somewhere, so that might become more meaningful. But that's why we have such a big team, and why the team is so important too, because that can happen all the time where I'm kind of out of ideas, but maybe someone else has one.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to ask that because I know with these poor kids as they go through these different things, I can only imagine the feelings of, I'm not succeeding. This is taking longer than I want it to. And I was trying to think, when we were going to talk about this, I was trying to think about Inigo, and if we hit any of these roadblocks where he kind of wanted to give up. And I don't think we did, because I think Lindy and I kept it moving so fast for him that he could never maybe get there, and that's not to say that he didn't feel like that at some point. But I do think, I think it should be maybe communicated to parents that that it's okay if your child is unmotivated because of their overall picture of what they're looking at. In other words, children have real wisdom and they understand what they're going through. And I think it's so important, the work that you do and your team, to make sure that motivation continues to move forward, and that you drive to succeed. But I just wanted to hear from you what it is that you use. So you use your tools of teams around you, which is really cool. that makes sense.
Yeah. I would kind of add to I think sometimes it's just important to like validate that and be like, this is normal, that this is really hard. Again, part of the team, like case management, social work, all those people, And then even like the peers, sometimes there's other kids the same age at the hospital at the same time, something like where they can kind of share in that, like, yeah, we're both going through this really hard thing together. Which I don't know, you guys were kind of there still COVID time. So I don't know how much interaction there was, but
we weren't allowed to talk to anybody.
We had to be separate.
Yeah, I know, it was masks.
Yeah, it was a tough time. It was a tough time, but I mean, I think we even had a hard time getting off the floor, and I think you had to sign us out a couple times where
to go to the terrace.
Yeah, to go to the terrace downstairs, and you had
yeah.
to like let them know that it's okay. Like the Vegas can go down to the terrace.
Yeah, that's like an extra little challenge while you guys were there.
Yeah, because we
For
were
sure.
always wanting to go outside. Winter, it didn't matter to us. We always wanted to go outside. Inigo was an outdoor kid, so we were just trying to find anything that would motivate him. And we knew, even feeling the cold air, sometimes you could see it within him. Like he felt like, oh, we're hiking again or something, you know? So we were always trying to, poor Victoria, you were always bundling up in coats to take us outside.
I'm just a wimp. Inigo was braver than me.
No, seriously, we knew him so well beforehand that Lindy and I were just trying to figure out how to get him back to enjoy all those things again, and we thought it would motivate him. So it was why we always wanted to do therapies outside. It's why we always wanted to be traveling through the floors and moving. And I think it's why poor Leah never had us like sit in her office but one time, because we were always wanting to go do something besides sit.
Inigo was so busy. If he wasn't doing an activity, he was having a nap or something. But
Yeah.
I think it's important to say though that in Inigo's transition from Children's Hospital to Spaulding, just being in Spaulding motivated him in a way that was really amazing to see, because he could do so much more there physically and try his body again and test it. That I think the feedback that he got from you guys and the feedback that he got from his own body was showing him like, oh yes, this is definitely the direction I want to go. And we really saw him push each and every day, because therapies there are very intense. They're like 4 to 6 hours during the day. It's not like a typical hospital schedule that kids have, where it's mostly in your room, or you leave your room once a day to sit up in your chair and then you come back to your bed. But Spaulding was different, because you're going to each individual therapy. In Inigo's case, he's going to speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy. It's like going to class. Each after that one, you go to the next one, and then you have lunch, and then you have a little break, and then you can go to the playroom or something. So it just motivated him in a different way. Just the activity itself, I think, kept him inspired to keep trying, to keep moving.
Yeah, he was still young enough that recess was important to him, right, in a school setting. And so I think that's what physical therapy felt like to him.
Yeah.
And we had really built it up at Children's Hospital too, because for those first 3 months he was laying in a bed. As much as Lindy and I would get him up in a wheelchair, and we would do Inigo's Grand Tour, which was going to every floor of the hospital that they would allow us to, and then out to the gardens, to every garden that we could. He wasn't physically doing that, We were just wanting to make sure that we were changing the scenery for him. But we kept building it up for him as he went through radiation, and he got towards the end. We kept telling him, rehab is where, all the good stuff is going to happen, right? Rehab is, and we had a test, and the test was we would play thumb wars, right?
Yeah.
And so that was our gauge to see where Inigo was. And so he couldn't, it wasn't successful. And then all of a sudden he finishes radiation, and I wake up one morning and I do a thumb war with him, and he actually does a thumb war. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, this is awesome, you know?
Yeah.
And so as that happened and his hands started moving, we continued to drive home to him the idea, because he couldn't talk, but he could listen, that rehab is where this all happens. And we were so excited when they gave us the word that we could go to Spaulding. And I wonder if, because obviously none of us know what it's like to have posterior fossa syndrome, but I don't know cognitively exactly how that works, but I wonder if he thought we were going to be doing that outpatient, because he was so excited that we were going off to Spaulding. And then they move us to Spaulding. We get into a room. They set him up in bed. And he looked at Lindy and he just started to cry. And I think it was the idea that he thought, I get to go home now, which he hadn't been home in 4 months at that point. But I'll be doing rehab at Spaulding from home. And so I don't know if he just didn't understand what we were explaining to him. But it was only that first day that he was sad. And then after that, he was super motivated. Like I said, it was the recess idea. Like going to see Victoria was like going to play in recess. And so, especially for him, where he started to feel like somehow he could walk again. Yeah. Victoria, as you would walk him around the building, you know, I know that you have to assess what a child can do, but you also want to push beyond what they can do. What are your, how does that work, that assessment of we're going too far, or we need to reach certain markers, or he needs to be able to walk upstairs, walk downstairs? We know that we talked a little bit about that already, but as you see them hit certain markers, what if they pass the markers that you've set out in front of them? And then you're working with more cognitive processing and not necessarily physical limitations. Like, how do you assess those and the differences between that?
Yeah, I'd say definitely something we're extra cautious of, especially in Inigo's case, as he's undergoing any sort of like radiation. That can be really fatiguing. And knowing that he still has like a full 3 hours of therapy every day, it's a little bit of like a back and forth of, we want to make sure we're progressing slowly and steadily, but also not overworking to the point where he's so exhausted for the rest of the day or like the next day. So sometimes it can be a little bit of trial and error where we are like, oops, we went a little too far today. We got to just reel it back a little next time. But generally it's just based on experience and kind of making a note of what we did the previous day so that we can we're measuring either like the distance he's walking or the amount of assistance he needs, how long he's standing up on his own, something like that, so that we can make sure that we're incrementally making things a little bit more challenging. But definitely kids all the time surpass what we were expecting of them, which is awesome because they just bounce back and recover so quickly and can regain strength so quickly compared to adults, are kind of like what you learn in school. So, I mean, that's kind of part of the fun of our job, is just having to like adapt on the fly sometimes, getting to just figure out where they're at that day and where do we go from there?
Yeah.
It's so cool to see how fast kids heal, you know. I mean, I know, you know, I wonder how hard it is for you guys because you're in the forest to really see the trees with these kids. But I know when we left Children's in November and then we got back to Children's in January, so we were only with you guys a month. The teams couldn't believe how different Inigo was by the time he came back. And that was only a month. And I just find that incredible. And then for you guys never heard Inigo speak, but our very last day there, we had a speech therapist that was filling in on the day that we're transferring, and they came and asked us, do you guys want to do one more session before you guys leave? And we said, yeah, absolutely. And it was in that particular session that Inigo like yelled out with her. Like they were talking about making sounds and this and that, and he was like, I can't make sounds, But then all of a sudden he like
forced it out. And
forced
it
it
came
out. And the look on his face of like
surprise. Like, I did it.
I did it. And then a week later he's like saying words, and we're like, oh, this is how quickly this can happen,
Yeah.
We just felt like at Spaulding, so many of the right cues were put in place for him to, just enough of a challenge for him to reach each one and attain each one. Because by the time we left Spaulding, we're walking out with Inigo. Obviously, we had a wheelchair for to help him when he was very fatigued and things like that. We had that to help us too. And then, but we're walking out of him holding one hand. Just so that he has someone to hold on to.
I don't know if Victoria would have liked that, but yes.
Yeah, or holding our arm or something, but I mean, what a difference.
Yeah.
It's a huge difference to see how quickly kids move, and it's
we were
pretty
there
awesome.
4 weeks.
Yeah, 4 weeks.
Right?
And it's why we have such an affinity for that place. It's why we have such Inigo always wanted to go back and visit you guys because he felt like so much had happened there. And yet in 4 weeks, it was, honestly, how much could have really happened? But for us, it was everything. Here he is walking again. Here he is. We asked that he just be able to eat safely.
Yeah.
Right?
So we wouldn't have to rely on a feeding tube.
Yeah, we actually didn't care about speech. It was about food because we wanted to be able to take him home safely. And so, I don't. As someone that deals with posterior fossa syndrome like you do, I just wonder, is it any hard? It's got to be so much harder to deal with someone that can't communicate with you verbally as you go through a lot of this work.
It's definitely a different challenge, but I guess working in pediatrics and especially in this inpatient rehab setting, I work with so many younger kids that also can't communicate in the same way. So kind of used to like that side of it. And then, it is just something that we do see pretty much every day at Spaulding. So with, time and experience, it becomes easier. And it's great to have, my speech therapists right down the hall that I'm like, what are you guys doing to communicate? Or using like pictures or any sort of like board or any other tools. So we can kind of make sure that we're carrying that over because it is so helpful to just be able to get any sort of Inigo's input and finding out how he's feeling that day, what he likes and doesn't like, which you both were so present and, able to answer a lot of those questions too. But it definitely helps with, me forming my own relationship with Inigo to be able to just find some way to communicate a little bit. But it's definitely a little added challenge. But I think it's just something that, not that he couldn't communicate, it was just we had to communicate differently, which was awesome to have so many other people there to help with that too.
Eventually, when he could talk, he would say, "Dad, you talk too much." But the idea was, Lindy and I, we knew we had to be his voice through it, And I think we say that to parents all the time is, be aware you will have to be your child's voice through a lot of this. So parents know their children. Like, make sure that you're communicating and that you are, the little things that you may think are insignificant about your child are not insignificant. There's something there. One of the other things that we like to really push, and we have no background for this, and as we do the research, we find that there isn't a lot of evidence for it either, but we are advocates for therapy through posterior fossa syndrome, and we are advocates in it because we saw Inigo's comeback through pushing hard, working hard, doing a lot of extra physical therapy, doing a lot of homework that we would ask you if it was okay that we did, extra walking. Victoria, can we do walking in the evenings? Yes, you can do walking. And so we would do whatever Inigo could do, but it was
laps.
2, 3, 4, 5. I think we did 9 eventually. Like that's the laps we would do at nighttime. And that was to make sure that we closed our night off before he went to sleep. But as I do the research on posterior fossa syndrome, it says that there is no evidence that more therapy is better for helping a child process out of posterior fossa syndrome. Is there anything that you can lend to that idea? I disagree with that because of what we saw in our son. What are your thoughts on that?
I guess I'd be interested in what exactly, like what specific part of posterior fossa syndrome that might be referring to. Is it just referring to specifically like the cerebellar mutism side of it, or kind of the whole general picture? Because my background, I can't speak too much to the speech side of all of that. But in general, all of the other effects of the posterior fossa syndrome that Inigo is going through, in terms of his coordination and his balance, definitely, I would, totally agree. Obviously, I'm an advocate for therapy there.
Yeah, I know we're asking a therapist.
Yeah. But, and then, in general, just in any sort of patients undergoing any sort of like cancer treatments, radiation, just post like tumor resections, there's a ton of evidence just to show in that population that therapy is going to help prevent deconditioning, which is going to keep like stronger muscles, stronger bones, is always going to be helpful in, fighting off everything that their body is fighting through. So I'd say even just in unrelated to the posterior fossa syndrome, just in terms of when we're going through cancer treatment, therapy is always going to be beneficial.
Yeah. We can't say enough about it. We felt it's so important.
And I guess so the articles that we were looking at specifically said that there was no measurable benefit to doing more physical therapy, because it really had to do with how that child's brain was going to. In other words, it didn't matter if you threw a ton of physical therapy at that child's brain. It all depended on that brain.
Just like nerves taking time to heal, that sort of thing.
The reason why I don't believe that is because of the neuroplasticity part of it. And the idea that if your child was active beforehand, if your child had a lot of these pathways beforehand, it can only help for you to rerun those neural pathways again. It can only be beneficial for their comeback, because we're talking about something that is a screen for their brain to be able to process things quickly. And so if you're able to walk those pathways again with them through rehab, it only makes sense to me that the more that you can do through that, that the better it is. And so it does bother me that conversation is out there. Like, it doesn't matter. It just has to do with that particular child or that particular what happened in that surgery, how much damage is done there. But I just feel like if we could really let parents know how important it is to like get out there, to walk, to breathe fresh air, to move, to get that core strong again, to get those things, exercised again, it can only be beneficial, whether there's a metric for it or not.
Yeah, totally. I definitely agree. There's always, some measure of, if we're, waiting for kind of these pathways to reform or any sort of like nerve healing to happen, maybe some of that takes time. But the more we are working those pathways, the quicker we're going to see them just be reactivated. And also, in the meantime, if there is any sort of measure of just waiting for your body to heal, we want to keep your muscles as strong as we can. So once those pathways are kind of firing again, you actually have strength to use. So there's so many. I think it's hard to just like be so general about it because there's so many different little things we can always be working
Yeah.
on.
Yep.
Yeah.
The body's a unit. It's all connected. So it's all got to work together.
Lindy's like, are you just trying to tell people they need to go like run marathons? And no, for me, it's just the idea of like, I think the more that we can help our kids like get strong again, you know, they'll see benefits to it, you know.
And I stand by therapy. I think it did such, had such benefits for Inigo. And like Victoria was saying, once the nerves are ready, the body's there and
We saw that.
able to do the work.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe that's a great pathway into adaptive sports.
Yeah, that was like the highlight of Inigo's stay at Spaulding. As some of our listeners might know, they've already watched the episode with Leah, the rehab
Child life
specialist.
What can you tell us about adaptive sports? And I know that there are different, you guys do so many different things at Spaulding. I don't know how much you're involved with the adaptive sports or if you know what it is that is done out there. And then after that, maybe we can move into what you and what you guys figured out for Inigo.
Yeah. The adaptive sports program, does kind of run on its own, but is always available to us as a resource during therapy, which is great. We, especially with kids, so many kids come in and talk about, before my injury, before my illness, these are the things that I like to do. And usually there's like some sort of sports or something active involved. So it's a great way to, even while they're in the hospital, to be able to integrate some things that are familiar or enjoyable to, again, kind of like you were talking about earlier, just keep that motivation level up and also kind of show kids that maybe when you leave the hospital, things do look a little bit different, but there are so many ways that we can still get you doing the things that you loved. So it's just a great tool to have. Also just something fun to do during therapy. Again, kind of make it a little bit more meaningful and kind of bring back just familiar activities or even new activities that might not be familiar. We take plenty of kids on the adaptive bikes that maybe aren't like big bikers before, and it can still be just a fun way to get outside, kind of get some fresh air, change the scenery a little bit. But then definitely, especially with Inigo, knowing like we did from the history we were able to get from both of you, how important biking was to him. Definitely helped that was just like an easy, like, okay, we have to figure out how to do this.
Yeah, and you really met his needs on that, which was, I don't know, was it our needs? I think it was his needs.
Definitely his.
The family.
Well, I just remember having that feeling like we would never bike with him again. We would never be able, because you see his loss of balance, you see his loss of strength. And, when Lindy says like muscle tone, correct me if I'm wrong, but it felt like a week after his brain tumor surgery, he wasn't the muscly kid anymore.
It didn't take very long. We were looking at him in the ICU maybe like 2 or 3 weeks later, like, oh my goodness, his body is just wasting.
Yeah.
It happens very quickly, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, man, here you led us downstairs and, or you told, you guys have gatekeepers, or at that time you had gatekeepers and we weren't allowed to just go off the floor, but
It was COVID.
Yeah. So you signed us off. We went down to the terrace, or Leo would sign us out, and here we walk by these recumbent bicycles that are there, and he would just keep looking at them, and and they're like tied up, because we would go down there in the afternoons or the evenings, and they were tied up there, and he would just look at it longingly, and just he had never seen a recumbent bike before, so he was curious. Here it had pedals and that sort of stuff, but so of course there has to be limitations, because you can't just, a bicycle or a recumbent bicycle is a key for Inigo, But there's things you want to work on. There's things that you need to see. There's things that you need to write down in the report at the end of your day about what you did with Inigo, what goals. And it can't just always say bicycles, or can it?
Definitely important to keep in mind how that biking is going to work towards his PT goals.
Yeah.
Um, for especially that overall goal of getting home. 'Cause he can't bring the bike in the house, so he needs to be able to walk around your house too. Um, but pretty much if it fits with, working towards those bigger goals, I would love to use something like that as much as we can. So especially in that case, we're working on his strength and his endurance, which were two big things for him. Even his core strength, he's like riding over bumps and things outside. Get back to off-roading.
Yep.
But it's also a good, I know you guys really like ran with it too, but it's a nice way to segue into discharge. So we kind of can introduce these sports inpatient, but it's not like this is the only time you can do it. It's just introducing something to look forward to after getting out of Spaulding and being home, and something to continue.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And we saw in Inigo how it was a motivator. It was an absolute key to continue his motivation. He got his bike back again, or a completely whole new bike world to him, which was really great. But as you're saying, it fit everything. It fit. His endurance was strong after that.
He could climb the stairs here at home
Without any issues.
Yeah.
His cardio was good. I mean, we're talking, we would go on like 3, 4, 6, 8, 15-mile bike rides after we went home. We would do all of Concord Minuteman like Park. We would do the Bruce Freeman Trail. We would go down to Newport, Rhode Island, and ride the town and go around the fort and up on the hill and have lunch and stuff. And
Wachusett Mountain.
yeah. Oh yeah, we climbed Wachusett Mountain.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard that, but when he
That sounds so hard.
Yeah.
I don't think I could do
he
that.
climbed it. It was so funny too, because of course Lindy and I, we've been in the hospital this whole time with him, so we've deconditioned, and
Yeah.
and so here he is, like well ahead of us, where he ends up out of view, where we can't see him anymore as he's climbing the mountain, and Lindy's like, "Can you please
Catch up to him.
She was so frustrated with me. She's like,
Tell him
"Can
to
you
stop."
can you chase him down?" So yeah, sure. So, yeah, it made us work out too. So that was good. But, yeah, I just want to reiterate how important it is, to push therapy. I'm gonna always come back to that, because I think, Victoria, as you're saying, it's the way that you're gonna bring your child home safely. It's gonna give your child a better quality of life. It's going to enable them to recapture some of their mobility that may have been lost, and it can open up so many more avenues if you can get them into maybe sports. Like you're saying, you guys deal with a lot of kids that used to be hockey players or baseball players, or you name it.
Soccer,
Yeah.
swimmers.
So I just think it's really important to reiterate that. I think I come back to being so frustrated as I go through the research that there always this caveat that more therapy is not helpful, and that just bugs me to no end. It just bothers me because I can't see how that's true. I just can't see how that's true. But yeah, so okay, you send us home, and you came to our room, and you had a list of the things that Inigo would need. So it was a wheelchair for when he was tired. It was a walker for when he could walk. You go through this assessment process to send a child home safely. The overall goals that you're looking to do are what for quality of life?
Yeah. Yeah, which is completely different for every kid. But yeah, it's more just thinking of the day to day, like what you guys might be doing activity-wise daily, what the child has needed so far at Spaulding, or kind of anticipating maybe their needs. But yeah, wheelchair is a common one, just more based on the, in your case, just the endurance factor, because Inigo was standing and walking, and he could, walk throughout his house. But you guys are, if you're going to an appointment or just something, shopping, going to the mall, who knows, just normal things, because we're kind of trying to send you back to some normalcy. Longer distances are, you're just going to encounter needing to be up and moving around for longer than you were in the hospital. So I just want to make sure you guys are prepared for that. Or just talking about like strategies, maybe if it's not a wheelchair, it's okay. Like, do you know where you're going? Is there like a bench you can sit on if you need it? Or making sure you can walk for like 5 minutes is the longest you've walked in the hospital. So you're just going to make sure that you are slowly increasing that, but don't get yourself stuck somewhere that you walked like 10 minutes away and then you have to walk 10 minutes back. It's kind of just, tailoring it to each situation, but just making sure we're kind of thinking about different scenarios that you might run into at home. Sometimes something like the walker also is something that on those nice flat hospital hallways you don't need, but when you're going outside or even just at home, there are like rugs or things like that. We want to be thinking about all of those different, tripping hazards where it might be nice to have a little extra support. I'm trying to think if there's any other. We always think through, car rides. Do we need anything extra there, just for support or safety or comfort? Anything additional, like just shoe wise, I might recommend, make sure we're always wearing sneakers, even inside for now, just because that gives you that extra little bit of support on your feet. But yeah, different for every kid. Also thinking through like the home scenarios, the stairs, I think we kind of talked about, but we pretty much always practice trying to set up some sort of staircase to be exactly like what you have at home. So we're practicing with the correct railing or the same amount of steps. So all of that is kind of always in the back of our minds, but definitely leading up to discharge is something we want to be even more specific with, making sure we're practicing and you're prepared for all that.
Yeah, you guys set us up good coming home. We wish, Lindy and I talk about, we wish we would have had like 2-3 more months with you guys, just because of the growth we saw with Inigo. But your approach, and I guess it's just the approach that you guys have, where 3-4 hours of therapy a day plus whatever extras we could do, and we saw such a trajectory. And yeah, maybe it was the natural trajectory he was going to go on anyway, but just the opportunities that you guys gave us in a safe environment, doing all of that extra stuff really enabled him to have such growth. And we always wondered, like, oh, if we would have had 2 months there, how much further would we have gone, or 3 months, or, that's an always just interesting for us to just think about. And we tried to keep it going as we left too. Of course, it became more difficult because as Inigo started chemotherapy, that really shunted his growth. It was so exhausting. It was so systemically difficult for him, and we're just so glad we had that month after radiation to really allow him to really, find some success.
Yeah, I think that's definitely always a tough conversation with families too, is like, when is it time to leave rehab? Because we're seeing such great progress, but sometimes we get to that point where it's being in your home environment with access to just even like your backyard and comfortable, familiar things is also so therapeutic in a different way. Which I know that definitely was the case for your family, in a lot of ways. So it's, definitely trying to find that balance of making sure that you're ready and supported and feeling like we got the most out of rehab, but also knowing that being in your home environment a lot of the times is going to be like the most therapeutic for so many kids.
Yeah. He just wished he could have used the pool. He loved swim
Yeah.
therapy, but the pool was closed back then. He did end up doing swim therapy,
yeah.
and it was fantastic, but he would always look at that pool longingly, like, yeah.
So, Victoria, in closing up here, do you have any advice for other families in situations like ours?
I think from kind of just the therapy side, definitely just being open and communicating your goals, whether they seem, lofty and really far out, or whether they seem really small. The more we can kind of get to know your child and any specific goals that you have, just helps us even more make that therapy more meaningful, or helps us integrate things that are going to be enjoyable into the rehab process, and make sure that once you get home, we've kind of accomplished all those things and are sending you home in a really good place. So I think the more that we can just get to know your child through you and through them, helps us with all of that.
Victoria, we are so thankful that you took the time to talk to us. There's so many more things that we could talk to you about that we're interested in, but we saw your gentleness and your kindness and your quiet nose to me or to Lindy, and it was so good to see how you would work with him, and it really taught us how to do it differently going forward, which was really good. I think for parents, as we go through this, we don't know what avenue to take when it's just us with our child after a situation like Inigo's. And it was so great to work with someone like you, that you were so calm and patient. You had objectives to reach, you had goals to get to, and we were able to really kind of learn from you on how to do a lot of that stuff, on how to walk with him, on how to do stairs with him. You showed Lindy, nope, this is how you stand on the stairs behind him or in front of him, depending on. And it was just little things like that really made a big difference for us going forward as we did transition home. It made being home safer. It made traveling around safer. And it's just so important what you guys have to share. We didn't even get into the emotional impacts that it, puts upon you guys. And I think that's important too. But I'll just say from our side, we are just left with such warmth for the work that you did for our son. And it really laid a big line in front of us on how to do things, on how to push hard, on how to work through certain things. And from our side, we can't thank you enough for the work that you did with him and the work that you do with other kids as they deal with posterior fossa syndrome, or all the myriad of things that you deal with at Spaulding. So thank you so much for what you do. We really appreciate you.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you. It was, a joy to work with Inigo and your family. I have a lot of really good memories from your time in rehab with us.
We missed you guys. He wished he could see you guys again. We did go and play on the playground, which he was not allowed to do when he was at Spaulding. So,
oh, good. I'm glad.
Yeah, we got over there and we played on the playground. I think I sent Leah some pictures, and she was like, "Why didn't you tell me?"
Yeah, you would have had us all running outside.
Anyway, we appreciate you. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.